Well, hello, everybody. Today I have a very, very special program. I have a dear friend of mine that has been a mentor and a friend for a few years now. Dr. Andy Woods is going to be with us, and he's going to be speaking on the topic. We're going to be discussing the topic of the rapture of the church. And some of you might be wondering why we're going to be talking about the rapture. And the reason why is because it is very, very close to my heart. This is how I found my Messiah, through the rapture. So I'm praying that through some of the questions we're going to be answering, that it would be ministering to you and it would be a blessing to you. I know it's going to be a blessing to me because every time I listen to Dr. Andy Wood's teaching, it's always very clear and I always learn something. So Andy, welcome to the show.
Olivier, it's good to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And I don't know if you knew that, but 37 years ago, I was reading this little book that a lot of people got saved through that book, The Late Great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey. Mm-hmm. And I was in France. I was going to work every day on the subway, and I missed my stop several times because I was looking at this little book, and I got to the place about the rapture, and I got scared, and I thought that people cannot possibly believe that such an event would take place. Mm-hmm. And it sounded kind of childish of a concept. So I asked the young woman who would very soon after that become my wife of 37 years. And she said, well, Olivier, this is exactly what's going to happen. I don't have all the details, but the believers are going to be taken away and those who don't believe will be left behind. And that was years before the Left Behind series was written. And so that it scared me into thinking, I don't want to be separated from God. I don't want to be separated from this young girl. And so she led me that night of, I don't remember the day, but I remember that it was in the middle of July of 1985. She led me to my Messiah because of the rapture. So I always, when I talk to God, I often say, Lord, please let me experience the rapture because this is why I came to you. But if I don't, I don't. But I have a special place in my heart for the rapture. Now, you've been teaching about this quite a bit. Now, do you have any books that you've written on the rapture, or you speak of it in various books you've written?
Well, first of all, I did know a little bit about your background because David and your wife told me that they had prayed for you, by name.
Right.
But I didn't know the details about the rapture and how that was integral.
Yeah.
David Hawking and your wife, how they prayed for you for your salvation. So,
right.
In terms of books, I have not written a book directly about the rapture, but it's something I want to do. The closest thing I have is a little booklet, which I think may come up in the questions today, about how the departure comes first. I have a little booklet trying to explain how that is the rapture.
Right.
But I'm doing a series right now at my church. I'm on almost lesson 50, on the rapture. So I guess it's important to me.
If people
like
want
it is
if people want to find you and get more in depth about this topic before we get into some of the questions, where do they go?
Well, probably the easiest way to go is to go to my YouTube channel. Just type in Andy Woods into your YouTube search engine, and there'll be a play tab there.
Right.
Sorry, not play tab, playlist.
Playlist, right.
And you can get the Rapture series there. You can go to our church website. It's archived there at Sugarland Bible Church.
Sugarland Bible Church.
www.slbc.org. And you can find my stuff also on andywoodsministries.org.
Now, for the 3 or 4 people who don't know you, where is your church?
3 or 4. It's in Sugarland, Texas. So we're southwest Houston.
Okay, very good.
So we're really not officially in Houston, but I tell people Houston because no one has heard of Sugarland.
You know that little booklet that you wrote. I'm very impressed with it, and I'll tell you why. Because whenever you write a booklet on doctrine or theology from in our world, and you are able to make Dr. Arnold Fruchtenbaum change his position, that is success to me. Because Arnold is another mentor of mine, and I was that impresses me. So anyway, so now I want I want to ask some basic questions because a lot of people hear
Okay.
rapture. Some might be believers, some might not be believers. But first of all, let's start with the basics. Where is the word rapture in the Bible? Because for me, I have to find things in the Bible. So where's the word in the Bible?
Well, you're not going to find the word rapture in the Bible any more than you would find the Trinity, the word Trinity in the Bible.
Okay.
But the concept of the Trinity is there. And so we just accept it as biblical, even though we don't see the word. And it's the same with the rapture. The concept is there, but the word rapture is not there. But when you go into 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 17, you'll see the word harpazo,
Right.
which means in Greek, which means to be seized or caught up by force. By the way, it's where we get the word harpoon from, where you
Oh,
thrust a spear, into a fish or whatever, and yank it to yourself.
right.
And when Jerome, around the 4th century, was translating that verse into what we call today the Latin Vulgate,
Right.
from the Greek into the Latin, he used a word that sounds like the rapture. I think it's raperi, rapturo, something along
I
those
think it's right. I
lines.
think it might be rapturo.
Rapturo. And
In
then
Latin.
when when you translate the Latin into English, you get the word rapture. So it comes from the Greek to the Latin to the English. But the word isn't there in the original Greek, but the concept is there.
And I think it's a lot of people when we talk about the rapture, that's the first thing they say if they're like skeptics. They say, "Well, it's not, the word is not even in the Bible." But you're right. If the concept is there, it just takes time to find, to look through the verses and find out that something is described. Like you talked about the Trinity. It's not there by name, but it's all there in the New and the Old Testament actually. So
Yeah.
the rapture. Now the rapture is there an idea, a concept of the rapture in the Jewish scriptures in the Old Testament, or are we just finding it in the New Testament?
Well, the rapture concerns the church, and the church in the Old Testament was a mystery.
What
Um,
was Enoch raptured? Can we say that?
that's true. There are individual raptures. You have Enoch taken to heaven, before his lifespan ended.
Right.
The same thing happened to Elijah. There's a few other examples, but so there is an idea of a rapture in that sense. But the
Right.
idea of the thing to understand is the rapture concerns the church. The church is a mystery unknown in the Old Testament. So we really have to wait really until the teachings of Jesus, the very late teachings of Jesus in the upper room, to get the first reference to the rapture, which Paul, unpacks and unfolds in the epistles. So the rapture of the church is what I'm speaking of,
Right.
is really a New Testament concept. Now, the second advent, which I guess we'll get into, which is different than the rapture, that's a two testament doctrine.
See
Old
that
Testament, New
was
Testament.
that's my second question for you, because people get very often confused between the rapture and the second coming. So can you clarify that for us?
Right. Well, the second advent, that Jesus is coming back and he's going to return and set up his kingdom. That's an Old Testament and New Testament doctrine. You'll see it all the way back in the book of Job. I think it's in Job 19, is it? Around verses 25 and 26. I know that my Redeemer lives, and in the end, he will take his stand on the earth. And that's Job, of course, is the oldest book of the Bible that we have. So that's a concept that's very different than the rapture. I have a little chart. I can do this fast, showing the differences between the rapture and the second advent.
Okay. Should I?
In the rapture, he comes in the air. In the second coming, he comes to the earth. Zechariah 14:14 comes in the air. 1 Thessalonians 4:16 and 17. In the rapture, he comes for his saints. 1
By the way,
Thessalonians 4.
I just made you co-host, so you can probably just show this chart if you want.
I don't know if I can, because I've got it on another computer screen.
Oh, okay. Never mind then. Sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
Yeah. In the rapture, he comes for his saints. 1 Thessalonians 4:15 through 17. In the second coming, he comes with his saints. Revelation 19, verse 14. The rapture is a blessing. 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 18. The second advent is a judgment. Revelation 19, verse 15. The rapture will only affect believers. 1 Thessalonians 4:16, but the second advent will affect believers on the earth at the time who will be raptured, but also unbelievers who will be judged. Revelation 19, verse 15. I'll do these fast, just four more.
Right.
The rapture is invisible. 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 16. The second coming is going to be visible to the whole world. Revelation 1, verse 7. Rapture announced by an archangel, 1 Thessalonians 4:16. Second coming involves myriads of angels, Jude verse 14. Rapture is a resurrection. It's a time in history where the church age believer receives their resurrected body. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 51, but there is no resurrection associated with the second advent. And then the rapture is a rescue operation for the church. 1 Thessalonians 1, verse 10. The second advent is a rescue operation for the nation of Israel, who will be in faith at that time at the end of the 7-year tribulation.
Right.
Matthew 23, 37 through 39. I mean, there's many other differences. I've seen charts of 50 to 100, but that's my short list.
So you thank you that gives us quite a few scriptures to look at to see the difference between the rapture and the second coming, or second advent, as you call it. But this makes me think of something. When we're raptured, if we do experience the rapture, let's say that we do, will we be raptured with all the believers will be raptured? You mentioned the church. So what about, let's say, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob? Are they going to be raptured at the same time with us? Because it talks about the Old Testament sense. I mean, how does that work?
Well, I don't think so, because they're not part of the church.
Okay.
The church started in Acts 2. And the program for Abraham and Noah and Daniel, they received their resurrection at the beginning of the millennial kingdom.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Daniel 12, verse 2, Revelation 20, verses 4 and 5. But anybody that has trusted in the Messiah in between Acts 2 and the rapture itself is part of the church age, or the body of Christ. And
Right.
we all receive our resurrected bodies at the point of the rapture.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, here is I don't like when people ask me questions like this. So just because I don't like it, I'm going to ask it to you. What would be your top 3 verses in the New Testament to validate the doctrine of the rapture? If you had to really make a case using only 2 or 3 verses, what do you think, in your understanding, are the most powerful verses validating the existence of such an event?
Well, the first verse is coming from Yeshua himself in the upper room in John 14, verses 1 through 3. And that's right after John 12, where the triumphal entry has taken place. And it's very clear that national Israel in the first century as a nation, the leadership I'm speaking of, I want to be careful here, Olivier, because I know we don't want to be misunderstood as a Jew can't get saved in the church age. Obviously, that's not true.
Right.
Because you're saved, and
Amen.
The whole Jewish leadership, the whole leadership of the church was Jewish,
Right.
until Cornelius. So, I like to say national Israel leadership, they rejected their Messiah. They weren't going to receive the kingdom. And so now the Lord, in John 13 through 17, in the upper room, starts to unfold something they didn't know anything about, which is the church, which was about to be born on the day of Pentecost. And part of the church age doctrine includes how the church age will end. And that's where the rapture is disclosed. John 14, 1 through 3, the passage, in my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you. I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, you may be also, comfort one another, etc. So there it is. That's the first reference to the rapture of the church. And Paul the apostle.
Now, I was going to say this, by the way, this verse really fits very well in my understanding with the order of the Jewish wedding system.
Yes.
And how he's going to come to get us before the tribulation. To me, that makes a lot of sense. That's maybe for another time, but that to me,
Sure.
it validates a pre-trib rapture.
Yeah, because Jesus is Jewish, and in the upper room, he's speaking to 11 Jews.
Right.
And the late Ronald Showers, he has about 10 steps of the Hebrew wedding sequence, and you'll
Right.
see the rapture, the betrothal period, the time of separation, and the coming to receive the bride at an unknown time fits rapture teaching perfectly. But anyway, Paul in 1 Thessalonians 4:13-18, I believe takes what Christ said in the upper room and develops it further, crystallizes it. That's why he says, "This we say to you by the word of the Lord" in verse 15 of 1 Thessalonians 4. I mean, what word of the Lord? It's the word, I believe that's the word of the Lord that the Lord spoke in the upper room.
He's making a reference to that.
Yeah. And then the last place Paul really develops it, in a real strong way, is in the resurrection chapter. In 1 Corinthians 15, verses 50-58, the Corinthians were denying resurrection. And he's explaining the insanity of that. And he starts to explain when they're going to be resurrected. And I think he talks about the rapture there. So you take those three passages, John 14, 1-3, 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 13-18, and 1 Corinthians 15, verses 50-58. And it's quite clear, that those are my three favorites for the rapture.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. They make the doctrine of the rapture, they make it pretty clear. Now, I know that not all people will be in a rapture. Obviously, it's only believers. But there is, it's just, I'm not thinking of anybody in particular, but I want to touch on this for a minute. There is a view that some Christians will not be in the rapture, and I think it's called a partial rapture theory. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Well, yeah, it is the idea that if you're not living a sanctified lifestyle, if you've drifted into carnality as a Christian, because Paul himself doesn't promote carnal Christianity, but he reveals the unfortunate possibility of carnal Christianity, just kind of drifting back to the flesh. 1 Corinthians 3, verses 1-3, 1 Corinthians 3, verse 15, many passages. It's the view that if you're in that state, you're not raptured. And that's called partial rapturism. But the problem with that is Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 51, we will not all sleep, but we will all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. And think who he's talking to there. He's talking to the Corinthians, which is the most carnal church of the first century that we have record of.
Right.
Other than maybe Laodicea. I mean, they're dividing amongst their favorite Bible teachers, chapters 1-4. They're committing incest, chapter 5. They're suing each other and visiting temple prostitutes, chapter 6. There's rampant divorce and remarriage, chapter 7 of 1 Corinthians. The stronger brothers are flaunting their freedom in the presence of the weaker brothers, chapters 8-10. There's total abuse of spiritual gifts. Putting tongue talk.
Are you talking about today? Or what are you talking about?
Well, Ray Stedman called it first Californians. But, they're putting people that speak on tongues on a pedestal with no interpretation, chapters 12-14. Chapter 15, they're denying resurrection. You can't get a more messed up crowd. I mean, how would you like to be the pastor of that group?
Yeah.
And Paul, you'll notice all the way through there, he never says, well, you guys aren't Christians. He warns them about loss of reward at the Bema seat. But it's to that crowd that he says, we will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. So if there was ever an opportunity to reveal partial rapturism, that would have been the place to do it. And Paul doesn't do that.
Doesn't do it.
And so what people need to understand is the rapture participation in it is part of God's grace package to all believers. And
it's given to us from the point of salvation, and it's
yes,
taken away. just like our
Yeah,
salvations cannot be taken away.
bingo. That's exactly it. And so that once you start to understand that, it demolishes the
Right.
partial rapture. A lot of people use it as a control way to keep people under control. Like,
Right.
you better not be living like the devil this week, because if you're in the movie and a bad scene comes on the movie, the rapture could happen and you're going to be left there in your chair. And I'm in favor of holy living, believe me, but I'm not in favor of using motivational tools that we don't
In a
have.
sense, it reminds me of a little bit of the control that the Roman Catholic
Yeah,
Church has
sure.
over its people. Like
Yeah, and everybody that teaches it assumes they're in the group that's leaving. By the way, they're the teachers of it never think they're going to be left behind.
no, because they're spiritual enough to be taken.
Yeah, and so once some Christians are taken in the rapture and some are left behind, the carnal Christians go into the tribulation, and the point of the tribulation is to straighten them out. And as they get straightened out and become sanctified, then they get raptured to heaven one by one. And so they treat
it sounds like purgatory to me,
exactly. That's
which
what I was
is
going to
not
say.
a biblical doctrine.
Yeah, it's what I like to call it as a Protestant purgatory.
Yeah, and it's that we don't find this in the Bible anywhere.
No.
Yeah.
And sadly, some today are saying if you don't have the right view on eschatology, I heard one fellow say, if you don't have the right view on Israel, and of course, Olivier, there's nobody more pro-Israel than you and myself.
Amen.
But you can have the wrong view on Israel and still be a Christian. I'm not sure how much of Israel I had figured out, when I got saved. But coming to a right view on Israel, to me, is part of the growth. And the Bible never says if you don't grow, you're not going to get saved. So I was disturbed. I'm disturbed by people recycling old doctrines like partial rapturism that have been refuted a long time ago.
Well, friends, this is all I have time for this first episode with Dr. Andy Woods on the topic of the rapture of the church. So stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you and shalom.